Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the third Dare I Say live stream on this Wednesday evening. And I've got a very, very special guest for us to talk about, and we're going to dig into the topics in a moment because there's quite a few that's got people very enthusiastic. And Mpiyakhe, my friend, it's been a long time since we've sat on opposite ends of a screen like this. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing very well, Gideon. And you?
Same, freezing my butt off, but I think that's the case for most of the country. And good
Not
evening
me.
to your okay, not you, but also good evening to our audience, to Jane, Peter Harvey, Matse Tsebale, as well as Chris Caddick and everyone else in the comments. And Mpiyakhe, maybe just for those that missed the part that I wrote in the video description below, just a brief sort of intro about who you are. Because that's also important.
Yeah. Okay. So I basically I worked for the Free Market Foundation for a while. I was a researcher. I focused on more on data analysis and writing. And then before the FMF, I was a writer. I used to write just for numerous publications, the Rational Standard, multiple others. Got published on a few other publications like News 24, Business Day, and so on. And so that's what I've done. And by my day job is basically being a programmer, web developer. So right now I'm more of a mentor, tutor for students who are going through web development boot camp based in the UK. So I'm working from home now. But other than that, yeah, that's what I've done. I'm in anarcho-capitalist as well.
Of course. And I think that the other thing that's important is you're not a so-called subject matter expert on what we might be discussing tonight. And there's a very good reason for that, is that a lot of people feel that their opinions on matters that directly affect their lives is either they're told or encouraged to believe that those opinions then would be invalid or hold no weight because they're not an expert. And I think both you and I firmly believe that that's the biggest load of rubbish and nonsense that you can tell somebody or encourage them to believe. And we're going to unpack that in a minute. But, in the tag to this video and why we're having this discussion, Eskom's now approached NERSA, which is the energy regulator of South Africa, national energy regulator, for essentially a 33% increase in their tariff. An increase in the unit cost for people that use less electricity, below a certain threshold. So the less electricity you use, the more you're going to pay per unit. And worst of all, if you've gone the solar route to try and take your dependence on the grid down, they want to charge you nearly 1,000 Rand a month, which is more than a lot of people use in electricity a month, just because you dare have a solar installation. Whilst the grid has been on the brink of collapse for I can't remember how long, and you're sitting
more
with
than 10 years now.
More than 10 years now. You're sitting with a stage 6 rolling blackouts, which I think was a first, and we had that for about 2 weeks. That destroys lives, livelihoods, businesses, ability to work. Before I tell you what I think of it, Mpiyakhe, like what?
Well, this is what you should expect from government. I mean, you get less of something and you pay more for what you are getting or not getting. So this is what you should expect from government. I think a lot of organizations like the FMF and other people through their writing and so on have predicted this is exactly where we would end up, with a monopoly state-owned provider of electricity or any service, really. So there's a lot of people predicted this, even without the ANC's corruption. A lot of people predicted we would end up exactly here. And now that we've gotten here, well, it hardly helps to say we told you so. We are here now, and we all have to deal with it. And so this is just craziness. And I think people should I think we're at the point now where people should just disobey and refuse to follow this craziness. I mean, you can't be asked to pay, even if you've decided to get yourself to reduce your dependence on Eskom. You can't be forced to pay and just accept it. So that's why we need platforms like the ASA, so people can sort of fight against this nonsense. But even if it passes despite the opposition that will undoubtedly come, then the only other option is disobedience.
And I think that's probably what's going to happen. Whether or not people want to disobey or feel strongly about to disobey, I think a large number of the populace simply can't afford compliance with it. We're sitting with the highest inflation we've had in 13 years. Cost of living expenses are through the roof. The number of unemployed people and the job prospects for them the number of unemployed people have gone through the roof, and the number of job prospects have plummeted through the floor. We're not sitting in a particularly pretty situation here, and I think what makes this, not what makes it worse, what makes it better is the part where you said civil society needs to step up and get involved. I think that's something we've been saying for a long time. By the way, for those of you watching, dare I say, we'll be running a public input campaign pertaining to Eskom's requested and proposed tariff increases, so you can have your say of what you think of it, which is important, and that does have impact. We've been saying this a lot, and your former colleague Martin van Staden was on here 2 weeks ago. And Martin feels particularly strongly about these issues, but we've been encouraging people to take ownership of their democracy for a very long time. Time's running out. It's now is the time to hold these people accountable. And hi, Graham. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, that's very nice from Graham. No, it's the time now to fight as hard as we've ever fought. But as much as we can say people should fight, I mean, it's all like I appreciate a platform like DSA because what it does, it scales up the ability for us to get more people involved in public participation. Whereas before there were a lot of barriers, you had to write an email or write a letter yourself, and you had to format it a different way. So DSA takes care of all of that. So we can get many more people involved now because of DSA and the internet. So that's good. But for me, I think that the only real change is only going to come when where more people take action, yes, get involved, participate in these campaigns, but also just take action and do something, whether it's as simple as voting or maybe doing something else. It's hard to say what, but maybe disobeying some of these things, I think it's necessary. Because now it's just crazy. We can't live like this, and we know that the private sector is able and willing to provide power. So why not give the private sector a chance now? Because now we are sitting in a situation where we are busy forcing private producers to only provide power as renewables, when the country needs power now and needs it urgently. And we need more than renewables. We need baseload power as well. We need nuclear. We need coal. We need all of these things. We need gas. So this is the time now. Every South African should get involved in their personal capacity, in their companies and everything. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure much more can be said about this, but we need more people to get involved and fight against these things, because this is crazy. We are in a dystopian environment now, where you have the government owned utility trying to push through and above inflation increase again. I think this is inflation right now is at 7.4%. So 32% is more than.
It's nearly 5 times.
Yeah, it's more than 5 times. It's more than 5 times what inflation is, and it just gives credence to the fact that regulated prices have been the main driver of inflation over the past 10 to 12 years. What has happened is prices like fuel prices, electricity prices have actually gone higher than inflation. So what that tells you is that the prices that government controls actually rise faster than the prices that are controlled by the private sector, which completely dismantles everything that we've been told about, the evil, greedy private sector and the good, generous government.
So here's my thing, and I'll engage a little bit with the comments in a bit. And Chris is correct. I think that Eskom are stupid. Let me just get his comment back on the screen here. Eskom are stupid. Instead of punishing solar producers, they should let the solar owners to feed back into the grid, so we can work together rather than against each other. Now, this brings me to my next point: is these tariff increases, these 500% the rate of inflation tariff increases. What's the motivation, in your opinion, for that much money? And my second point, well, let's start there, and then I'll come to my second point that ties in with Chris in a minute.
Because the Eskom is structurally inefficient. It has way too many staff, that way too much staff that does nothing, like or does their job less well than they should be doing it. And so when you are structurally inefficient, whatever you do, you are always going to need more money. Because what happens is, because if someone, because it's not so much, okay, you have a lot of old machinery, a lot of old power stations, but also at the same time you have a lot of people who are getting paid way too much for the value that they add to Eskom. So because of, we have to pay for those people, we have to pay for those machines. So the machines we can fix, we can get we can get new parts, we can potentially build new power station. But when it comes to people, that's going to be the real challenge, because you have to figure out a way to get rid of some of these inefficient people. And they know that they have the ability to hold the country hostage, as you saw with the industrial action. So those people know that as soon as there's any whiff of them being removed or being fired for doing their job badly, then they are going to hold us hostage and they are going to shut down these power plants. So we need to, this is the real problem, because as much as we can, there are things that can be done to fix the power stations. It will cost a lot of money, but there are things that can be done to bring back some of the power stations, to extend the life of some of them, to build new ones. We can do all of that, even though it will cost money. But the real problem is that you have the structural inefficiency in terms of Eskom staff, and unless you're willing to address that problem head on, you won't be able to go anywhere. So I think that's why you will just have to keep on keep experiencing these price increases, because these people, because one story that I read was Eskom was meant to borrow about 24 billion rands this year, but because of the salary agreement that they concluded with the unions after they held all of us hostage, now they have to borrow 45 billion rands. So now you see, it's always because of all of those things that we have to pay so much. So it's it's we were basically paying for those people to enjoy some of the highest salaries in the country, while the rest of us suffer.
That sounds an awful lot like derelict, irresponsible, and criminally negligent corporate governance and management to me as well. That's been thrown into the mix there.
Yeah.
And the government's proposed solution to this, Mpiyakhe, and I'm sure you read it this week, is that they want another state-owned power utility to compete with the one they already own. And I'm incapable of the required mental gymnastics to reconcile that idea.
It makes absolutely no sense. If you want, if competition, if government can effectively compete against itself, then why not say each power station within Eskom competes against every other power station? Why not do that? Why do you need another Eskom? Like, why do you need another power company? So it doesn't make sense. Are you saying that the executive that government itself has put in place, they need more competition to sort of put them on their toes? Then why not decentralize Eskom and break it up into smaller companies and have those smaller companies compete against each other? So there's absolutely no need for a second company here. There's even under the most because the owner is the same. You still have the same owner with the same stupid policies, the same the same things being imposed on Eskom, the same politicians that override Eskom executives when they try to hold the line and say we will not have salary increases, and they get overruled by politicians. So as long as you have that, then you won't go far. The example that they used is China, but China has a very different set of circumstances and a set of different sets of incentives. So it's not a valid example in our case. China is a large country with very diverse populations, with different governments, sort of at the local level, competing against each other already. So you don't really have the same dynamics here. And China, even then, China has a lot of inefficiencies. I'm sure you've heard about the ghost cities and so on. So China has a lot of inefficiencies itself. So they're not the gold standard. They just want to do everything but rely on the private sector. That's what it is.
I think Matetse Bale nails it here with this comment that says any potential plan to address Eskom's electricity generation is futile if the politicians are involved. No to a 32% increase. It's enough with our feeding liters with our money. And this is the sad story of not just parastatals, but other government organs of state as well, that they've turned, they're not really performing their mandated functions as sort of secondary. And it would appear that their primary function is to act as an employment opportunity for people that would be otherwise unemployable. And this is a bit of a segue, but that's probably why we're sitting with an average age of a rifleman in the SADF. Now, rifleman is the equivalent rank of private or trooper. It's enlisted. You're not even the rank of corporal. Average age of 34. That's a job or a unranked position that should be performed by 17, 19, 18-year-olds who's sitting with an average age of 34. And where it's not serving as an an employment opportunity, it's becoming a patronage opportunity in order for self-enrichment, which, and this is not just my opinion. I think there's been extensive writing and investigation on specifically this topic, which is why we're sitting. And Peter, I think that cuts to the core of the issue. Is far greater now, but the problem's a bit bigger than that, isn't it, Mpiyakhe? Than just
I think it's bigger than a minister. And I smiled when you mentioned the unemployment where you had the slip there with unemployment. Because these things end up causing more unemployment in the country. So that's why I smiled there. And I think this is a structural thing that we have in the government, because basically the entire government has to keep the ANC alive. So to keep the ANC alive, it has to keep dispensing patronage to all of the people that the ANC needs to keep living, even though it's destructive to the country. And so that's the issue we have. Whether it's Eskom, whether it's the SANDF, whether it's Denel, whether any, just name it, any opportunity to siphon money from taxpayers and from the country, like it has to be taken, because we have to keep this one organization alive. And that's what it is. And because if you look at the SANDF example that you use, SANDF has a lot of former MK cadres and so on. These people and people who claim to be military veterans but don't really qualify based on their age. So these people are purely there for the patronage and the corruption. So this is the problem we have. We have to keep this one organization alive as a country, and it's costing us a lot of money. But if the government stops dispensing this patronage to all of these people that the ANC needs, then these people will abandon ship, because the ANC has nothing to offer. It has nothing to offer policy-wise. They are at a loss now. I read today that Minister Godan wants to take up Solidarity's offer that he rejected in May, to bring on all the Eskom engineers, artisans, and so on, because now there's no other option. They're out of ideas. So I think we need to fire more than Gwede. We need to fire Godan himself. He's an underestimated cause to these problems. I think Godan gets off too many times, because he's actually involved with running Eskom, and he's made a lot of decisions that were destructive to Eskom. He has opposed private sector involvement. He has overruled executives. I remember the guy who came before the Director, there was a point where they tried to have a 0% salary increases and were overruled by Godan. So he's a part of these problems, and he was finance minister for most of the years that Jacob Zuma was president. And so he's a core part of these problems as well. So he needs to get fired as well. But not just him, the president as well. I mean, the entire government. I mean, all of them have failed. You can't tell me, like, the president, when he was deputy president, was given the job of trying to fix Eskom, and he made a lot of promises that Eskom would be fixed in 18 to 24 months. Look at where we are now. So all of them have failed. They have no more ideas. Hence, this idea of an Eskom 2, which would do nothing, absolutely nothing, except to waste more of our resources. Rather than work on solving the Eskom's balance sheet issues, they want to divert resources away from Eskom and put them towards this new entity, which no one knows what exactly it will do. Because the thing that they don't seem to understand is that Eskom's debt is guaranteed by government. So you can't really start a new company to solve Eskom's issues, because government is still liable for all the debts that Eskom has incurred. So it doesn't really solve anything to start a new state-owned company. It doesn't really solve the balance sheet issues that Eskom has. So we'll just dawdle it along until we get a new government, I believe.
So it's another SAA essentially, and the people who are picking up the tab for it are you and I and everybody else.
Yeah, and and they'll run these things into the ground because they refuse. Their ideological leaning they can't allow them to accept when these things have failed. So they run them into the ground. I mean, they'll run them to the point where you have to sell them at 51 rands or something like I heard what happened to SAA. So because they don't understand business, they are suspicious of the private sector, and they are Marxist Leninists. So that's how they think. So they won't have the agency of action to solve these problems. So depending on the government, all we can hope for is government give us more and more freedom, or allow us to take advantage of our freedom and solve these problems for ourselves, and not stop us from solving these problems ourselves. That's the best we can hope for, and I think that's the key role that DSA can play. Because if we can push for more private power producers, if we can push for against these ideas of a tax or against people who want to generate their own powers, push against that, allow people to generate their own power in whatever way, whether it's a company or individuals or a household. If we can do that, I think that's the best option. But trying to fix Eskom at this stage, we won't get anywhere, and it will probably just collapse along with the government, because they have so much debt that government is guaranteed.
Well, that's the other hazard to this, and there's quite a good couple of comments in the comment section I want to engage with. But just one thing about the government guarantees and taxpayers, obviously covering it. There's only a couple of 100,000 people, I think, that pay the overwhelming majority of income taxes in SA that keep that ship afloat. What people tend to forget is that every single person who pays VAT on anything is a taxpayer.
Yeah.
And what happens is that money is then being used to pay off the interest on borrowed money to pay wages at Eskom in order to pervert the cycle a bit. But Sean, thank you for being thankful for what we do. I personally really appreciate it. To everyone who's watching, by the way, that's not quite the halfway mark yet, but link in the description. You can please subscribe to the Dear SA mailing list. We do need more people on there. It's the best way for us to keep you updated with what's going on. And if you really like what we do and you would like to join us as a paid subscriber that keeps us going, or just a once-off donation, links are equally in the description below if you want to do that. I'll remind you all again later. So Gert Jansen van Rensburg made a very interesting comment, because I read similar sort of takes on this issue, but I'm not appraised enough to have a valid opinion. Eskom is being prepared to be privatized into African rainbow energy and power. It will be done once Eskom, in inverted commas, fails. Mpiyakhe, what's your take on the whole ARM thing? Because is it Patrice Motsepe that's in charge there? And isn't he Ramaphosa's brother-in-law?
Yeah, I heard that he's Ramaphosa's brother-in-law. But just on privatizing Eskom, I think if there was value enough to privatize Eskom, I think that's a lot what organizations like the FMF and the RR would be calling for now. But they've so destroyed the value that we've reached an ASAA situation where the balance sheet is so impaired that no private company will find value there. Unless the government says we'll take on the debts, you just take the assets. So unless the government does that and say we'll take on the debts onto our balance sheets, and then you just take the assets, if they do that, then maybe then it can be privatized. But other than that, there's no way to privatize it, because there's the companies, the net worth of the company is negative. The debt far exceeds the assets of the company. So you can't really privatize it effectively. So the African Rainbow Energy and Power, I just think that Motsepe is spotting an opportunity. He sees that government can't continue providing power, and he has enough proximity and closeness to the decision makers that he thinks that he can be more agile and be able to move quicker than everyone else and take advantage when the market for energy starts opening up. So I think that's what he's doing, like he did with RAIN and telecommunications, where he set up the company, and then just before Spectrum was auctioned off. So he takes advantage of his proximity that way. He doesn't really go for the direct corruption. He doesn't really he just uses information basically. He doesn't really go for the direct corruption. He's smarter that way. And and I should declare that I'm an investor in the mining company that he's involved in.
Okay, well, so captured in Mpiyakhe. I mean,
No,
no.
I think he's a great entrepreneur, and I think like a lot of other entrepreneurs in South Africa, not just him. There's a lot of other ones that are sort of compromised by their need to stay close to the decision makers. There's a lot of them. Like I mean, basically everyone who owns a bank has to be close to the decision makers, the policy makers. Everyone who's involved in the financial services sector, insurance, what have you, everyone who's involved in telecommunications. So I could tell you some horror stories, but I can't because they were it's things that were confidential that I saw in the course of my work in the party policy think tank. So I think there's a lot of people who are compromised that way. So sorry, I just cancelled that call. So I think there's a lot of people who are compromised just by the fact that their industry requires proximity of access to policymakers, and so they sort of have to play the game, but they won't really get involved in corruption directly.
You're a very popular man this evening in Mpiyakhe.
No, it's just it's just the wife. I don't know why, because I told her that I'll be doing this interview.
But so before I'm going to move us on to the next section, I just want to finish up the comments on this because, I mean, I think we've painted a very clear problem picture and a problem statement, so to speak. Bux Rode says the arme mense sal die ergste tref, and I think that is a major problem. What we have is that the poor are disproportionately hit by inflation. They're disproportionately hit by these types of energy price and cost of living price increases. But from what we've seen the past 2 years, with the erosion of the middle class, it's beginning to have a destructive impact on people that were otherwise financially secure as well, or used to be, and no longer are. And that has a knock-on effect on the economy as a whole and on people above and below. So it is going to hit the poor the worst. But I think it's becoming difficult to differentiate purely on your income level. It's misery.
Yeah, I think the middle class is getting poor. Is becoming like if you're in the middle class, you are heading more and more to becoming poor. And if you are poor, you are just getting destroyed. So, and if you are wealthy, then you're becoming more towards middle class. So it's just everyone is affected. I mean, it's always been a myth that these bad policies only affect the poor. It's just that the impact is more devastating on the poor. It's not that no one else is affected. Everyone is affected. It's just that the poor, like you actually starve if you're poor. If you get poor, you actually starve. So I think that's the distinction. But everyone is affected, and I think that's one of the tricks that people play on us. They say that they set up these arbitrary class distinctions when in reality everyone is affected to some extent or another. No one, like if there is no power, everyone is going to be affected. I mean, there's no one who has a secret source of power. Even Johan Rupert, I saw that he's been trying to get a generator on his farm approved so that he can turn it on and running for the past few years. So everyone is affected by bad policy.
Well, this is the thing. Bad policy touches us all.
Yeah.
And that kind of segues us into the next segment but what do we do about it? And we kind of, you kind of dove into that a bit in the beginning already, in the sense of people need to become involved. And a lot of times we're confronted with the practical difficulties of it, is people they firstly don't believe that their voice makes a difference. They don't see the impact. And to a large degree, ladies and gentlemen in the comments, it is also DRSA's fault. We have not always been very good at communicating the impact you have. And that's why we're having live streams like this on a regular basis. We will not be having one in the traditional sense next week, but it will be an update, by the way, on our court case against the National Health Regulation Amendments alongside AfriForum, which is not going to court next week. It's been postponed. We had to ask for a new date, but I'll give you a full report on that. We'll also send out an email that describes it in detail on our mailing list. So please subscribe to our mailing list so you can get that message. But we are continuing the fight because we see it as a constitutional issue amongst other things. So that doesn't mean it's over. the fact is people don't think that they're making a difference and that their voice doesn't matter, or that they need to be an expert to comment in Mpiyakhe, that they need some expert knowledge to be able to make a valid comment, which is rubbish. But you tell us about it.
No, on DSA's platform, you don't need to be an expert at all, because the thing has been formatted for you nicely and set up for you. You just need to say, you just need to write what you want to say, however you want to say it, because everything else has been done for you. Because the brilliance of the platform is that because submissions have to be formatted a certain way, the technology takes care of that for you. You can just focus on writing your comment. So public participation in that way is one great way to get involved. But I think also getting involved, getting closer to your community, and sort of becoming less and less dependent on the state, I think is another great way to sort of mitigate against these issues. So I think those two things, getting involved in terms of public participation, which I would say includes DASA and commenting on and submitting submissions on these issues, but also voting. I mean, and getting other people to vote, and engaging other people on to vote, and who they vote for, why they vote, and who they vote for. And also just getting involved in your community, in your church, in your local clubs, and so on, and just getting involved wherever you can, wherever, like, they strengthen numbers. And with these public participation campaigns, the volume really matters. Even if you just say, no, I disapprove this thing, if you just submit a one sentence submission like that, no, I disapprove of this, it really matters, because they have to consider all of those submissions by law. They have to consider all of them and factor them into the final bill, or regulation, whatever it is being considered. So all of those things matter. So do all of them.
That's exactly it. It does make a difference. It does matter, and it's not necessarily volume. Sometimes it's quality. But it's always a good, healthy combination of both. As volume and quality has that impact, and we've seen it on numerous things. And I was about to make a really good point on something, and it went in one side of my head, and it flew out the other. But we'll come back to it in a bit, because it has everything to do with. Oh, here we go. We've got the opposition in control of, I think, 4 major metros at the moment. They're in control of the city of Cape Town, which have been for a long time. They've got Ekurhuleni, essentially, in Gauteng. They've got Johannesburg, and they've got Tshwane. Now, seeing as that electricity tariffs and things go through your municipality, and you don't pay it directly to Eskom as a resident there, it would be very interesting to see if the opposition has the courage, and I hope they do, because it would be very good for them to take a hard line on this. If NERSA passes these tariff increases, to just frankly say, no, we're not enforcing this on people that have registered solar with us. We're not going to pass on these tariff increases to them. And we're not telling you who has solar. And no, equally, we're also not implementing the structure. And I think they would be justified in doing that. And I think if anyone from the DA happens to be watching us, there's a good strategy discussion for you guys to go and have, to really prove yourself as a friend to essentially everybody, because everybody consumes electricity and everyone's nailed by this. And if you can get that right, I mean, that would be a political windfall that falls into your lap right there. If you're an opposition politician, Mpiyakhe, what will you do?
Well, I think where the party governs, I think first of all they need to focus on the basics, like what Chris Pappas is doing in Umgeni, fixing potholes, doing all of those things. But I think also, is like I said in the beginning, it's time for disobedience, and I think they said this is a good thing to disobey this attempted change in the fee structure for people who use solar by Eskom. So this is a good thing to disobey, to say that okay, we won't tell you that who's using solar, and we won't charge this tariff for people who are using solar. So Eskom itself has to, if they want to charge people, they have to do their work themselves. What would be harder to do is for them to say we won't accept the 32% increase, because then the city still has to buy power from Eskom, so they'll be charged the 32%. So they might have no choice but to pass it on. But everything else they can disobey if they choose to. And it might be difficult, but they maybe they might lose a court case or two. But if they stand on principle on these issues, and a lot of people stand with them, and I think a lot of judges, if they really apply the principle of rationality, might start to see things the way that people are seeing it.
Well, that's exactly my thought as well. There's a grand opportunity for this, and Matsetse Bale is right again in the sense of we have no representation at this government monopoly. It essentially operates entirely autonomously, and if it decides to operate against the best interests of the public, there really is nobody to stop it, unless we're talking about the central government, who has unfortunately, up until now, not proved that that's something they're interested in. I just quickly want to answer Moonchild's question. I see that both Jane and Graham have already given her quite a bit of feedback, but the comments do matter. It was purely due to the overwhelming storm of public commentary. I think it was about 300,000 comments in the space of a month, 2 months, that got the National Health Act regulations kind of kicked down the road and is making it so difficult, if not impossible, for government to pass. Because I promise you one thing, if the public did not challenge that in their comments, it was about 98% in opposition to the proposed amendments. Government would have passed those a long, long time ago. In fact, with those leaked emails where our legal team was given about 1.5 terabytes of data, millions of pages, and they sifted through it, that internal communication where we were referred to as terrorists and saboteurs and where they wanted to treat the 300,000 comments as generic is an indicator of the level of internal panic that it created and how difficult it is for them to shift past public participation because it's constitutionally protected.
Yeah, now, and also there are other examples as well, Gideon. I think you would know more about this, but also on the Firearms Control Act amendment, there's another thing that they've had to kick down the road. EWC well is another thing. Because the EWC would have long passed by now, but because it keeps the comments are so against it, the national health insurance, another thing. So comments do matter. Like they keep postponing these things exactly because people comment and oppose them.
That's the thing. So, and that's also why we are definitely going to sharpen up our feedback that we give the public, so you can understand what your comments achieve and what they do, and we'll keep you appraised with the various campaigns as to bringing it to closure. Your comments as well. I don't know if everyone remembers the ICASA campaign where they proposed to tie your biometric data to your SIM card. It was the public comments from the RSA and the results of that campaign that was used by Right to Know and Amabungane in their own submissions as supporting evidence against the proposal. So we do work closely with other NGOs that are acting in the public interest. And we must bear in mind that not all proposals from government are always bad. That's almost it's always a controversial thing to say, but it isn't. There are occasionally, well, actually not occasionally, there's quite often, they come up with good ideas where they actually make your life easier, or where they go and they amend a previous law or ordinance that was overly onerous and they simplify it. Positive comments in support of that equally matter.
Exactly. No, that's true. Well, and I just wanted to add, government proposals that are good are the government proposals that propose government does less. So when government proposes to do less in some area, that's always good. But whenever they want to do more, it's always bad. It's never it's never a good idea.
Point, later census data used info gleaned from participants combined with satellite data to determine who has solar. You can indeed not hide it, but the government's capacity to process 60 million data points efficiently, I'm rather dubious of. That's the thing. The volume is just massive. Look, I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying it's not entirely that easy. And again, if you are paying your bill to a city power and you have a government that's friendly to its citizens or its residents' interests, a municipality at least, then there is definitely room for resisting bad ideas. But it does require courage from your politicians, and the best way to encourage courage from politicians is two ways: support and pressure applied simultaneously. And that is kind of just my layman's opinion, Mpiyakhe. But apart from commenting and apart from encouraging, let's talk about being politically active or active in your democracy and taking ownership of it. Because what we see is we have municipal elections every 5 years. We have general elections every 5 years. People go in the queue and they vote. Our last general election, I think, had a participation rate of about 66%, which is very low.
By our standards,
and it's been going down every year since 1994. People vote, they go home, they read the Mail and Guardian, and they might write a letter or two, and that's kind of all we do as middle class. If you're poor, you do service delivery protests, which actually are sometimes quite effective, because those communities often then get what they ask for. But how do people hold their elected officials accountable in this country?
I think local action, like I've said before, I think it can go a long way. You see, I don't really see much hope now in politics. I think that's why I prefer working through, like, yes, we can put pressure on politicians, public participation, and so on, and also voting is like we shouldn't waste any opportunity where we can have an impact on government. So voting is one thing that's available to you. Public participation is available to you, but also just forming independent communities. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and you see it with organizations like what's this the where this organization that this the way where they've started now, they have a university, Soltech, I think.
Solidarity.
Solidarity,
Yes.
and also some of the work that AfriForum has been doing. So a lot of people are doing stuff like that, even at a more local level, like, with churches and so on. So if we can have independent communities that don't need anything from government, I think the rest will tend to take care of itself. So I don't see much hope in politics, because there's the more time passes, the less and less government can do. I think there's some hope in coalition politics, but right now it's sort of not clear, because all of the potential coalition partners are fighting against each other at the moment. So maybe as time develops, there'll be more hope in that. But and I think there's also hope in people like Chris Papas in Umgeni, people like that, people who really have the spirit of being public servants, who really want to work for people. So support people like that. But other than that, what can you do? You can talk to people. Talk to them about their political choices, and sort of try to influence them. And I think also there's some scope for education, because the way things have failed in South Africa, there's a lot of examples you can point to, and go to a school, for example, a primary school or a high school, wherever, and say, see, look at how much government has failed. Government really can't do much. So you really need to do things privately to get things done. So you have to stop relying on government. And so I think there's a lot of scope for things like that, because we have the examples in South Africa. And it's a mystery to me why like the organized libertarians in South Africa don't do more stuff like that, and really just do more education, community outreach, and sort of talk to people. The Free Market Foundation used to do things like that, and they are when we were transitioning from apartheid to democracy, they used to do a lot of stuff like going into communities and teaching people. But for some reason, we've just sort of stopped doing that now. I don't know why, but this is the time to be doing it, because we've seen the attempted overreach by government, the failures. We've seen how things have broken down. So now we have the example. So would be the perfect time to start doing that again, because with the apartheid government, it had this veneer of efficiency, even though everyone agreed it was immoral and all of that. But it still had this veneer of efficiency, even though it wasn't very true in many cases, but it was still perceived as such. People were scared of the apartheid police force. They knew that it could get them. The SADF at the time, people were scared of those things because the government was perceived as being efficient, that they could actually do stuff. But now this government, the way they've proven their incompetence, the way they failed, you have many more examples that you can point to. So education could actually work now because the government has failed so much. So I think we should really consider investing in that again and start investing in those programs into schools. I mean, like, schools are always willing to listen. They always want people, like, teachers always want people to give them a break. So if you, Gideon, say, okay, I'll come into your school and talk about this policy or whatever it is, then the teacher is going to, like, you, let's say a history teacher or someone who deals with the subject matter is going to say, okay, I'll give you 30 minutes or whatever it is to talk about this.
Well, this is also the key thing is, and it's with my own limited interactions with the youth, kids today feel apathetic and disempowered. They're uncertain about their future. They don't feel like they have a voice or have any power and have any influence to change the trajectory that their lives or their country might be on. There's a feeling of powerlessness, and a lot of that, I think, is rooted in individuals not understanding just how powerful they can be.
Yeah.
And I also feel that the country is definitely at a form of a turning point, in the sense of the trajectory we were put on in 1994 is not the trajectory we're going to stay on. There's going to be significant changes, and I can't tell you if they're going to be for the better or for the worse. I'm hoping for the better, because I think things have gotten remarkably worse in the past 5 years, and in many aspects. And whether or not we're a failed state is open for debate. There are many people who deny it openly. I'm saying that those who say we are may have a fair case to make for it. So here's the thing, Mpiyakhe, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So if anyone who'd like to make some comments or questions for us, please pop them in. But where can people find you and your writing and the stuff that you're busy, well, not necessarily busy doing, but have done?
Yeah, I have a column with Rapport, so it comes out every 2 weeks. It will come out in the Sunday after the coming Sunday again. So the Sunday after this one, after the so the Sunday after this one. So yeah, so every 2 weeks there's a article that comes out. I also write for the Free Market Foundation every month. There's an article. I don't know when that one comes out. It depends really on where we want to place it and a whole lot of other factors. But it gets published. The best place to find my writing, I think, would be just to go to the Free Market Foundation website and search for my name under articles. That's the best place, because I write for them part-time. And also, if you understand Afrikaans, just go to the Rapport's website or get a copy of Rapport every 2 weeks, and you'll see my writing on there as well. So yeah, those are the best places. I also post on Facebook. My name is there. My name there is Mpiyakhe Dhlamini, not Mpiyakhe. My old account was given a permanent ban just during lockdown, so I have a new account now. So yeah, that's you can find me in those places. Yeah, my Facebook is just for fun. I'm not always serious, so people must be warned. It's just for me, so I post a lot of other stuff. If you want the serious me, you can go to the Free Market Foundation and Rapport. But if you don't mind, somewhere we sometimes make fun and make jokes and engage in humor and share memes and so on, you can also catch me on Facebook.
Awesome. That's where you can find Mpiyakhe. And I've known him for a good couple of years, and the man's a legend. So do follow him. Do read his writing. You put a lot of careful thought into the things you put out, which I think is evident from this evening. So on our last bash here, so a lot of commenters mentioned the shale gas reserves under the Karoo, the offshore oil and gas that we have. I have certain opinions about how that is not necessarily the answer, but it might not be for the reason that people expect. What is your opinion on it? On this as the solution for our energy crisis? Supposedly.
Well, I don't know enough to say that it's a solution, but as a general principle, I would say, allow the private sector to explore and to develop resources where there are any. Allow them to do that. What we absolutely must not do is have the government in the form of the ANC, try to take over these resources, via partnerships that they may have, via corrupt arrangements that they may have, and so on. But if you have a private company like Shell that's in partnership with the ANC, yeah, it's I guess you have no choice. But yeah, let the private sector explore and develop these resources and allow them to develop them as much as possible and to sell them where they think it's appropriate. So I think that's let the private sector do it. And yeah, I don't have much opinion beyond that. But yeah, develop the resources and see what happens. Maybe it will be a good idea. Maybe it will be a bad idea. Who knows? I don't know enough to say. But yeah, develop them and give the private sector a chance to develop them.
So here's my question about it though. So considering that our energy crisis is in large part to blame on bureaucracy, government regulation, the lack of free competition and free market alternatives, and this sort of stuff. I sometimes wonder if people aren't putting too much faith in the fact that exploring these resources are not a bad thing, but it's not as if we have an energy resource shortage. It's rather what we do with these resources that's the problem, or rather that we have monopolized who's allowed to decide how these resources are utilized.
Yeah, you said it perfectly, Gideon. Yeah, no, that's the problem is not that we have a shortage of fuel. We don't have a European problem where they are short of gas because they are reliant on one supplier, which is Russia. So we don't have that problem. We have more than enough coal in this country to supply our needs. We can probably get enough uranium from Namibia to supply our nuclear needs. So we can get gas from Mozambique. We have resources that we can get to fill our needs. That's not the issue. The issue is that the policies that the government has put in place that don't allow the private sector to meet these needs. So I think you are right. It's not a solution in that sense. The offshore gas reserves and the shale gas is not a solution in that sense because it's not really solving. Like, we don't really have a resource shortage issue. What we have is a policy issue, regulatory inefficiency issue. So we have all of those issues. We're just not allowed to produce the power. And other issues as well. The fact that government owns all the mineral resources via the so they have to license. They can choose who to license, and they often have arbitrary requirements like BE and so on before you can explore and use the resources. So we have those issues. We don't have we have enough resources to produce power, but we can't use those resources. That's the funny bit.
So here's, I think, a great way to kind of conclude our chat. And folks, please keep an eye on the DRSA website. Again, join our mailing list because we're going to do a campaign, a public input campaign on the Eskom tariffs, so the proposed 33% increase and all that other jazz, so that you can have your say on that. Since we've given some, and this is like, I feel like that irritating lecturer that says that's going to be in the exam, but if you paid attention in the class, you'd have your answer already. And I think we may have given you some answers pertaining to some of the campaigns that have been running and have run. On this particular one, here's a answer, Mpiyakhe. What would you write? What would your comment be on this proposed, if you had to write a submission right now on the 33% increase and all this other stuff, what would you put in it?
Well, a full submission would probably be more involved. You would point out that over the past 12 years, the Eskom tariffs have increased by, I think, 400% or something, while inflation has increased by something like 134%. So you would point out those things. That's actually increasing tariffs this much, which is 4 or 3 times above inflation, hasn't really solved the problem. So another 33% increase isn't going to solve the problem either. You would point out that you have Medupi and Kusile, which because of corruption ended up not being built on time, and when they were finally finished, they were not built to the way they were supposed to, and they have a lot of issues, which is costing more money to fix those issues again. So you would point out all of those things that, another tariff increase isn't going to solve the Eskom's problem. Giving them more money won't solve the problem. That's just something that has to die. It's a myth that has to die. Giving them more money just encourages the unions to be more militant and to demand more. So it doesn't really solve the issue. You would point out that their staff count has grown by so much, has grown exponentially actually since 1994, while they are installed capacity, or what the power that they can produce has actually gone down. So you would point out all of those things. So yeah, that's what I would put in a submission, succinctly. But yeah, of course, in a submission you probably have to think a little bit more about it.
Well, I think that's a very good summary of what a very thorough submission would look like. So, folks, there you have a grand example of what you could put in it. What we'll do after the show is we'll turn that segment into its own little separate clip. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel and we'll share it around on our social media. So, if you want to say something and you really have no idea what to say, Mpiyakhe just kind of gave you a solid idea over there. So and that's for free, Mpiyakhe. Thank you. You see, we do give back. And as we come to the closure of our show, folks, thank you so much for joining us here in the middle of the Wednesday. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy calendar to be here. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are trying to grow that one. If you like what we do, you can sign up to our email list. You can subscribe as a monthly subscriber to DRSA itself. We appreciate your support, financial support, to keep rolling, as well as once-off donations. That's all in the description below the video on Facebook and YouTube. Mpiyakhe, and thank you for your valuable insights, and everyone else who made some comments. Any final words from your side, sir? Not final as in you're about to die. I mean final as in the show is about done.
Yeah, no. I thank you for having me on. I really appreciate this. I think, yeah, man, I appreciate DSA a lot. I've submitted. I've submitted a few times to them. I find them to be the best way to make these submissions. Before, I used to try and follow the formats recommended by Parliament and so on, and it's just too much of a bother. Don't even just go to the DSA website to make your submissions. It's the best way to do it. So yeah, I appreciate that, and yeah, and I think there's a lot of issues we should take. The main one right now, the main global issue being inflation. So just keep an eye on all of these issues and keep pushing these politicians to do the right thing via your submissions, via your community participation. Get involved locally. Make sure that you have people around you, good people around you, that can defend you when the time comes. Because we have a lot of issues, and something major we haven't talked about is crime. So there's a lot of crime that's going on right now since lockdown. So you need good people around you to defend yourselves and to defend each other. So yeah, man, get involved involved with other people and form partnerships, form relationships with other people, with good people, and fight back against all of this nonsense that comes our way from government and other places, from government and other criminals, I should say.
Well, I like that. I think that talks about individual resilience, family resilience, community resilience, and ultimately national resilience as well. We need to have you back on for the crime topic. And folks, in the comments, please let me know if you'd like me to bring Mpiyakhe back. We can talk crime. If you've got any questions that I missed or that you'd like me to address on future live streams, please send us an email to info@dearsouthafrica.coza. We do read them and we do interact with them and we do respond back and we do incorporate your questions and comments into the live streams. At least we'd like to. This is our third one only. We haven't received all that many. Next week, and I'll make sure to market the stream ahead of time. We will be talking about the court case against the National Health Act regulations, the amendments to that, and where we are in that space. Mpiyakhe's former stomping ground, freemarketfoundation.com. You can still read him on there. You can also catch him in the report every second Sunday, and not this Sunday. It'll be the Sunday after this. And I just want to interact quickly with Mate Tebale one last time. We should face realities about too many shortfalls in our government. There's too much of problems due to lack of quality of plans around in every sphere of governance. Risks just too high. And I think that is something pretty much all of us can agree with. Mpiyakhe, from your side?
Yeah, no, I agree with him. And something that's Leon Lowe, one of the former directors at the Free Market Foundation, he used to bang on about was this impact assessments there for every bill and regulation. So that this is a thing that government doesn't really do well. But if they did that, then it would address whatever is talking about. If you had impact assessments for every bill, every regulation.
That's exactly it. And I think on that, like I can do a Jeremy Clarkson. Oh, hang on a second, Anton. Let them ask it from the ANC because they're the ones that still.
Yeah, they're broke as well.
Exactly. And yes, bring back Dhlamini. Always erudite and educational guest. So we'll definitely bring you back on, Mpiyakhe. Folks, we've run over at 9 o'clock marker, but we've given you a full 1 hour show, even though we're slightly late. Thank you for being here. See you all next week, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday evening. Thank you, and bye-bye.